Everyone. Hey, welcome to the January 22nd meeting of the Lawrence Douglas County Metropolitan Planning Commission. This is a hybrid format meeting. Will, would you walk us through the rules of the meeting, please?
Yes, my name is Will Mansfield, planner, and I will be helping to facilitate the Zoom portion of the meeting. We will work alongside the chair to facilitate the meeting proceedings. I have a few housekeeping items for this hybrid meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting when you are not speaking. The chat function for this public meeting is disabled. All chats will go directly to me. Unless you are participating during the meeting, please turn your video off. This allows the active meeting participants to be seen on the screen. You will still be able to hear the meeting. When you are participating, please turn your video on. If you have any trouble, you can send a chat to me. The city reserves the right to mute or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. And now I'll turn the meeting back over to you, Chair Rex Rode.
Thank you, Will. First item up, to receive or amend, approve the minutes from last month's meetings. Entertain a motion to approve.
I'd move to approve the March 25 minutes.
And the 27 as well?
And the 27 as well.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner DeVere. Any discussion? This was the minutes that we were going to approve. Any discussion on that? All right. Those in favor, aye? Aye. Aye. Opposed?
I need to abstain. I was not here on
All right.
the
So you're
27th.
going to abstain as well. All right. Thank you. Thanks to both of you. All right. Next up, to receive reports from committees that have met over the past month, we have the Lawrence Douglas County Metropolitan Planning Organization Policy Board. I think David and Charlie are on that board. Anything to update us on?
Yeah, we had a couple of items. We approved an update to the Transportation Improvement Program, Amendment 7, and also the Regional Pedestrian Plan for Eudora, Baldwin City, and Lecompton.
Awesome. Thank you. Any questions, comments? No? All right. The other item up on committee reports is the Land Development Code Update Steering Committee. There's been a fair amount of activity around Land Development Code update process. Module 3 has been printed. It'll be reviewed and released after this Thursday's steering committee meeting. The Land Development Code update materials up to date have begun being reviewed by the Planning Commission in our mid-month meeting. We'd met mid-month this month. We have a plan for next month as well. And there's also a plan to have a discussion on that, correct me if I'm wrong, on the May meeting, the May formal meeting, to have our consultant here to answer questions. Is that correct?
Yes, the timeline's still a little bit in flux, but we're anticipating that to be the case.
Hopefully that'll be the case. And then potentially for maybe June before it comes back to the Planning Commission for a formal, but I'm getting ahead of myself.
We'll know a little bit more after steering committee, but that's kind of the penciled out timeline that we're working with right now.
Very good. Thank you so much. All right. Any written communications from the public, Jeff?
There was one addition that was received, and it was included as part of your packet this evening.
All right. Thank you very much. Receive any written communication from staff, planning commissioners, or other commissioners?
None this evening.
I receive written action of any waiver request determinations made by the city engineer.
Also none this evening.
All right, now it's time to declare any ex parte communications, anything before us tonight, particularly on rezoning, the quasi-judicial, where you've had conversations you want to share with the rest of the commissioners? Seeing none, thank you. Any abstentions from tonight's items by commissioners? Abstentions, we're all in. Thank you so much. Now's the time for general public comment. This time is set aside for the general public to address the Planning Commission with items not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone here to speak on those? Anything else not on the agenda tonight? I am, sir. Thanks. If you come up, state your name. You have 3 minutes.
My name is Randy Swain. My wife and I are 47-year residents of the Albemarle neighborhood. I'm here on behalf of Scott Robinson, president of the Albemarle Neighborhood Association, who is out of town, to express concern regarding certain proposed changes to the city's planning development code. Yesterday, I sent an email to 3 planning commissioners, which I understand has been forwarded to the rest of you, and I apologize in advance for reiterating some of my remarks. that going to go on?
I hope not.
But I'm going to focus on two key points, and I prepared a 5-minute presentation, so I'll go as fast as I can. We believe that inclusionary zoning works for greenfield development, but shouldn't be applied retroactively to infill development. We also believe that the potential loss of green space existing in the area represented by the Albemarle Neighborhood Association would be a tragedy for not only the Albemarle neighborhood, but for the city of Lawrence. With regard to inclusionary zoning, the reason we believe it works is that in greenfield development, if a developer elects inclusionary zoning use mix, buyers will know in advance when they buy a spec house or have their custom home built. They'll know what is already next to them or what could possibly end up going in next to them. So when people make that major investment in their home, it is a known. But inclusionary zoning that attempts to alter the character and nature of completed developments through infill of their existing spaces certainly changes the game, with the high probability of devaluing the adjacent homes and diminishing the quality and effectiveness of the city itself. With regard to the potential loss of green spaces in the Albemarle area, it is well known that the beauty of Albemarle is what attracted so many people to Lawrence who would otherwise have chosen to live elsewhere. I worked at Payless Shoe Source well before it went bankrupt from 1987 to 2006. There were 700 people in our corporate office, and they were all directed to come to Lawrence to find a home because they were moving from out of state and they weren't attracted to Topeka. When I would go to a Quail Run parent-teacher conference, I would see 1/3 of the people there that were my colleagues from work. I know that Hill's Pet Products, also headquartered in Topeka, had a similar hiring and recruitment plan. In 2015, the Albemarle golf course operation was purchased by a local developer / construction company owner who promised that if you live on a golf hole, you would always live on a golf hole. Sadly, in 2022, he discontinued operation of the Albemarle 9-hole course, but there remains green space behind the homes on that course. At one of the early hearings last year for the land code, we talked to the consultant with a concern that these green spaces might become residences, and she indicated that Albemarle would be expected to be an exception to that kind of development, and talked about how the land development code would not be expected to result in infill of any of the Albemarle courses. From our reading of the draft document, it appears that changes would make it easier for this developer or others to eliminate those green spaces on any of the Albemarle golf courses, and we have great concern about the potential for further damage to our neighborhoods and the overall appearance of the city of Lawrence. While we support the diversity of neighborhoods and the need for affordable housing for all in Lawrence, the planned changes to the code would have the opposite effect, leading to potential elimination of one of the best features of our city.
Randy, I need to ask you to wrap up, please.
I'm done.
All right, thank you so much.
All I was going to conclude with is we will be at the steering committee meeting
Thank you.
on Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Is there anyone else here to talk about topics not on tonight's agenda? Will, do you see anyone online?
I do not.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll move on to our first item, and that is to consider a pair of rezoning requests. We'll take this as one item, but it'll have two votes. And Sandy Day is here to talk us through this.
Excuse me just a minute. Kurt, do I need to share screen? Oh, you've got it. Okay. You got it. Thank you. Sandy Day, Planning. So the staff report in this presentation does cover two specific applications. They are distinct applications within the context of your actions this evening. There you go. The subject property is located on the west side of town, south of 6th Street and west of Wakarusa Drive, and more specifically, one of the parcels is located on the south side of Legends Drive, and the other parcel for the RM15 is located on the west side of Research Park Drive. I'd like to take a moment to address some comments that we received regarding communication and notice. This project is subject to notice, as it is a public hearing item. Due notice was submitted to property owners within 400 feet, and so when people say they haven't been noticed, it is very probable that they live outside the boundary of that 400 feet. The project also requires to have signs posted along the public street, so one would have been provided along Legends Drive and another along Research Park Drive. This project has been properly noticed. The subject property is currently zoned in the IPB district, and within that district, it is a unique district within our community. It's the only IBP district we have in the city. It comes out of historical development intention for a business park type of project that started, some of the zonings go all the way back to '83. The current IBP district zoning is an effect of the Land Development Code, so that's why we see it, that it's been zoned since 2006 in the IBP district. Prior to that, it had an M zoning district. What we see within this area is that it is only about 57% developed. There's still a fair amount of vacant lots within this district. There are a couple of places within the area where there are some dedicated conservation easements. Those are tracts that were part of plats along the Ironwood, I believe it's Ironwood North subdivision. And the development of this district is really dominated by medical office uses. We've heard references to gymnastics, dance, prime martial arts, Newvant House, Montessori School. All of these uses are permitted uses either as medical facilities, recreational facilities, and community facilities, but they are not what we would think of classically as industrial business park type uses. Also within the neighborhood, this is just an image of how this project sits or is situated within the larger context of a portion of the West Lawrence neighborhood. It is one of the largest neighborhood districts that we have in the community. We've had some conversation about a future extension of a pedestrian pathway. This part of the multi-use path has since been constructed, and it terminates at Legends Drive. It basically follows a gas line utility easement, and you cannot build, you cannot have structure within that easement. You may be able at times to have pavement or parking depending on the project. In this particular case, your action is to consider only the zoning. You do not have a development project in front of you. That would be a site plan action. I did check with the Parks Department, and this is not this is not a primary interest for them to extend the path. So that is what we are looking at this time. Whether that property becomes part of the open space calculation for the development, that is a factor of the site plan. With regard to residential density of the project, the proposed request is for RM12 and RM15. Both of these are medium density zoning districts. Did just a very quick calculation on a couple of very nearby areas. So this is Cedar Grove number 2, which has some RM12D zoning, and that would permit a higher density than it's been developed, but it's about 6.9 right now. This area is about 3.1, and it's characterized with detached dwellings on individual lots. And then similar to this project up here is duplex development at about 5 dwelling units per acre. Within the larger neighborhood context, we do see some other multifamily projects around, and they are really a range and mix of duplex as well as some conventional multifamily apartment type projects. And again, these particular pieces tend to be more of a planned development project. This is the review criteria for the zoning. We applied these criteria to both of the projects. Conformance with the comprehensive plan. This is classic infill development. We have looked at the IBP district. We have seen requests over the last number of years where there's a transition within that district to go from the IBP to some form of a residential project. That's this continuation. You saw the surrounding zoning of the property, the character of the neighborhood that we've talked about. There are no area, neighborhood, or sector plans for this area, so that is not applicable. The suitability of the subject property, we have not seen development come forward for an industrial interest. We have seen many times various types of residential projects come forward in this area, whether they be for subdivision development with detached housing as Cedar Grove, or some of the other residential projects that we've seen, Newvant House, and I've drawn a blank on the other one to the south. This property has remained vacant since it has been annexed, and that goes back, I believe, to the 90s or earlier. Detrimental effect on the property would be nil. We would be looking at those impacts and through site design, and that is not the purview of this particular group. Gain to the public health, safety, and welfare, and we believe that by activating the property, having a land use, this is not open space. This is somebody's property, so it's not part of the green space inventory for the community. Staff's recommendation is for approval of the project. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know the applicant is also here to answer questions for you.
I'm sorry, not yet. We'll come to public comment here in just a little bit. All right, so the applicant, Sandy, thank you so much. And the applicant is here. Is that Will, Stan, or Shannon?
It will be two of us. I'm
All right.
Stan Hernley, Hernley Associates, 1100 Rhode Island Street, architecture
Stan.
firm. Hello. Nice to meet you. And then Shannon Oury is here also. She's the executive director of the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority, and she's going to speak a little bit also. So really, there are only four things that I'm going to speak with you about. So when Shannon approached us about the potential to purchase the property and look at potential rezoning, we went through pretty diligently and looked at potential zonings that would fit the type of housing product that fits into into the portfolio of the housing authority. And RM12 is the lowest multifamily designation that's available to us. And then RM15 we felt was appropriate along Research Park Drive, mainly because, a little bit higher density, just 3 additional units per acre. But Research Park Drive, as you know, exits out to the south to Bob Billings Parkway, and if you're leaving the neighborhood to the north, you would turn to most likely to the east and exit out to Wakarusa Drive. So we don't feel that the east property will have much of an impact at all in terms of traffic on neighboring residential to the west and to the north. So the second point is about the concept plan. So we're required as part of the zoning application to submit a concept plan. The intent of the concept plan is really just to show one potential way that the number of units that are permitted by the requested zoning district can fit on the property. What we've depicted in the concept plan on the RM12 property to the west is a group of 7 buildings that would have 4 units in each building. It's very similar to a building type that I've worked on several different projects in Gardner and Garden City. It's a smaller footprint. If you look at the footprint of the buildings proposed on that parcel, it's very similar in size to the duplex units that are directly to the west of us. So the footprint of the fourplex units is only slightly smaller than the footprint of the duplex units directly beside us. The RM15 portion, we're showing a group of buildings that would have 8 units in each building. And it's 4 units on the first story, 4 units on the second story. So again, it's a smaller footprint. It's not one large building. And it's only two-story buildings. The units haven't been designed yet. We've done some of these units where each of the second-story unit has an inside stairway. The Aberdeen Apartments at the southwest corner of Wakarusa and Clinton Parkway are designed in that manner. They're eight-unit buildings, and all of the stairs are internal for each second-story unit. We've also done units where it's still 4 units per floor, but there's a pair of central stairs in the middle of the building so that the upstairs units share common stairs. But in any case, it's smaller buildings. It's not large footprint type of buildings. So the third point also is looking at the concept plan a little bit. So the layout on the western portion, the RM12 portion that we're requesting, the buildings that we've shown can easily fit within the area without paving over any of the gas easement that's along the west edge or the other easement that's along that west side. So we're, when it comes time to design the actual development plan, the actual detailed layout of the site, we're happy to design it in a way to not go into that area. And if at some point the city Parks Department becomes interested in extending the path further to the south, that would just be another amenity that would be a real great feature for this property. So we can definitely incorporate that. And the last topic for me is about the technical issues. As you know, when a development plan comes in, it's going to be scrutinized for stormwater control. It's going to be scrutinized for providing fire safety, access onto the site for fire trucks, making sure that sanitary sewer systems don't affect anything downstream negatively, and if it does, we have to address it. So those technical issues will all be handled at the time that those become appropriate. So now Shannon would like to talk with you a little
You
bit.
guys have a total of 10 minutes together, so.
Okay. I took too much time. You should have told me that first.
So I'd just like to point out that affordable housing is a key issue in this city, and it has been, and it's something that all of us should care about for people to have a safe and affordable place to live. And we didn't come in here and say, what is the top zoning we could possibly ask for and build 350 units in this space? We purposefully came in and said, we want to be part of the neighborhood. It's the housing authority's goal always to be a good neighbor. We take care of our properties. We just had a HUD inspection and we scored a 89% out of 100 on how we take care of our properties. We would be the owner of this property. It will be years before we can develop it. So all of the designing issues, traffic issues, school issues will change significantly between now and when we can actually fund this project with tax credits and money that the housing authority is saving. All of those issues can be addressed. I provided an article from the Urban Institute that shows that having affordable housing in your neighborhood does not decrease your value. And it's a matter of where can the people who wait on you, where can the people who are, serving your parents at the nursing home, where can they live in this community? And there should be some place that people can afford to live in this community. And we are not trying to overburden the neighborhood. We've tried to be very reasonable with what we're asking. We are currently planning for one of the parcels to serve seniors and the other parcel to serve families, so that we're not trying to overburden a school or do anything of that nature. We're trying to provide safe and affordable places for people to live.
Shannon, thank you. Appreciate it. All right, so shame on me for not being more clear with everybody about how this process works. Let me just go through that real quick. When we open an item up, the very first thing that happens is staff gives a report. And then if there's an applicant, they have 10 minutes to give any additional information to that. Then we go into public comment, and that's where we are right now. And at public comment, we'll have 3 minutes per speaker. If you approach the podium, say your name. Please queue if there's several of you to help us expedite the meeting a little bit tonight. And say whatever comments you'd like to share. We do not do Q&A as a part of public comment. If you have questions, you're certainly welcome to ask them, but we're not going to be answering those from the dais during that session. We'll look in the room and we'll look online as well. Once public comment is complete, the applicant will then have 5 more minutes to provide any additional information that might have come up as a part of public comment. Once public comment is closed, we'll bring it back to the commission, and at that point, public comment is closed completely. We will not be coming back unless a commissioner has a very specific question on follow-up for clarity from someone who's already spoken. So with all that, those are the rules. So now we're at public comment. If you are here to talk about this item tonight, please come to the podium. Please feel free to queue. You have 3 minutes each. Hi, thank you.
My name is Christina Leonard. I live on Merrily Drive. I believe that I probably have one of the largest residential properties that is directly adjacent to RM12, I believe it's being called tonight. And I understand the importance of affordable housing. My neighbors and I on Merrily Drive have affordable housing. People need more than that, though. People want clean neighborhoods. People want quiet neighborhoods. People want safe neighborhoods. I'm a little worried about the plans that I've seen, how congested it looks, how large it looks, how looming over our properties it looks. The way the neighborhood's been described tonight seems a little inaccurate to me. Across the street, across Legends Drive, are brand new $500,000 homes, which these days is actually not that big and fancy, but these people have worked hard. They've sacrificed hard for those houses. They pay huge property taxes in this town. I don't feel like building a huge housing complex right across the street from those houses is a way to thank them for living in this community and for paying those heavy taxes. It seems kind of like, well, let's just lower your property tax. Let's lower your property values is what it would be doing. There's a Montessori school right there on the corner. It's been there a long time. I think it was one of the first things built in that area. And it looks like the 8-plexes, the 7 4-plexes it sounded like, and then the 4 8-plexes are going to be towering over the Montessori school, over the playground. So I just feel like the way the plan was depicted tonight sounds a little bit different than what I've seen in the buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, folks, please. I'm going to ask you no applause, no comments in either direction, please. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Dr. Jerry Manweiler. I live on 1333 Stone Creek Drive, about a quarter mile from where the property is discussed. I have some serious concerns about what I've heard and what I've read so far in the planning that they've discussed, and I'd like to present these things to you. One of the things they present, and it was discussed, that there's a study about showing how the housing values don't go down and things are really great and nice. It's a study used in Alexandria, Virginia. The study itself argues and says the body of evidence is against what the results of the study are. So it really makes me wonder what's going on in the study and the nature and the differences of what's in Alexandria, Virginia, as compared to what the body of evidence that is arguing differently. So I would suggest you have serious considerations about whether this actually reflects what's going to happen in Lawrence and in our city if this type of development. And this is assuming that they're going to do the type of development that they have shown in the plan. I have serious concerns just looking at the study itself about the nature of how they've used the statistics of what they've done in this study and the conclusions that they've come up with. And so I just bring those to you. I don't have the time to actually present the nature of how those statistics are, but I have serious concerns about them. Other pieces that I'd like to talk about, and this is one comment that was made specifically by the presenter, is there's an exit out to the east, and for people who want to go north, they're going to use this exit out to the east. Well, that's actually not what happens now. What happens right now is people use Stone Creek Drive to get out to the north. And Stone Creek Drive is a winding, it's one of the, the rare winding pieces of drive because it follows the conservation and the parkland just next to it. And it is not in any way at all made for the kind of traffic that we're talking potentially adding to this community. That kind of traffic flow, already this Stone Creek Drive is overwhelmed, and we have numerous numbers of speeders and traffic that come in and resist in our children that are there. And we have lots of young children along this drive. The school district itself, Langston Hughes, would be incapable of adding more school children to this area because they're already overwhelmed. I'm looking at my time. The material, the Montessori school itself is incompatible with this type of flow, and I guess that's probably about all I have at time. I really want you to seriously reconsider this and reject it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the room here to speak on this tonight? Hi, welcome.
Thank you. I'm Perry Kennard, and I live on Stone Creek Drive as well. And I guess I'm a little disappointed in hearing the Planning Commission on a couple of different accounts. I'm opposed to the project as a longtime homeowner on Stone Creek, but saying that the Parks and Rec doesn't feel it's a priority to extend the trail doesn't make sense to me. When they extended a little segment behind our neighborhood, I see people there that I never even knew were in the neighborhood. More and more people, you build it, they come. And extending the trail would allow us to access some of the areas on Wakarusa where there's actually some restaurants and businesses and such that we could actually walk to or bicycle to. So not extending the trail doesn't make sense to me. And then saying that this doesn't count as green space. It is green space. There are wild animals there. It is a natural area. And trying to preserve at least some of that, I think is important and should be a priority for us.
Thank you, sir. Hi, welcome.
Hey, good evening. I'm David Vargas. I do live on Little Live Drive right across the street from the Montessori school. I do believe this would have the negative impacts as discussed. And looking at the PowerPoint and the limited information on the agenda that's online, I don't feel there's been enough staff work by the city to make a vote tonight. And I would also encourage that we would have more than a concept of the development and have more of a firm plan. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Will, is there anyone online that's here to speak on this item?
No one online.
Nobody's online. I just heard one more thing. My name is Jacob Wilhelm.
Okay, yes, sir.
Jacob Wilhelm, 1213 Morgan Court.
All right, hi, Jacob.
72 units, right? So, yeah, okay. Well, that's ballpark, but I'm trying to think of the math on not having traffic added. You mentioned that. I don't really understand. Probably 2 cars per unit, more or less. That's a lot of traffic.
Please.
So
go ahead. You can continue if you'd like.
I'm just kind of saying, I think it could be quite a bit of traffic with small kids. So.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes. Hi, Allison. Welcome.
Allison Vancemore, and I'm here as a supporter of the project. I live in the neighborhood. I own property adjacent to this project, and I know that we have been a community that has said for years that we need affordable housing. We need affordable housing to purchase and to rent. We are completely underserved in this market. We have a growing demographic of our baby boomers. Our seniors need housing, and I personally have sat with this and my feelings about this living in that neighborhood, driving Stone Creek Drive, because that is my way home every single day, even though I live further west into the neighborhood. And I believe that this buyer specifically has been thoughtful in their approach, and they have a recognized product in the marketplace that is very different than the preconceived notion by many sitting in this room. And I believe that if anybody wants to have a personal meeting to answer questions specific to this project, the aesthetic, blending in with the neighborhood, being a good neighbor, that would be time well spent. And as somebody who grew up incredibly poor, I find it insulting that we would ever say that the poor creates problems or unsafe or issues that are not reflective of the poor. We don't make decisions based upon people's economic income, and I think blending them in neighborhoods that aren't all the same is a perfect demonstration of moving away from gentrification. We can't penalize a school district of all the same kind of population. This blends the services well with seniors and with residences, and I think that this project has quality merit in this particular site.
Thank you. Hi, welcome.
My name's Duraz Birdie, and I, along with my wife, Paris Birdie, we are the owners of the land. And the reason we purchased these two parcels is because we were the owners of Lawrence Montessori School, and we did not want to see any kind of development that would be not in line with the school. Specifically, we were informed that there could be some industrial development taking place when we purchased it in 2017 or 16. The properties. A few points. My understanding is that the Douglas County Authority do want to make the buildings similar to what you see north of Legends Drive. And it's not going to stand out. And maybe, Shannon, you could have shared some of your property.
I'd ask you to please just direct your comments.
Sure, okay. And the final point is that my understanding is that next year this would be considered an industrial, would have that designation as well. And perhaps the neighbors, and I fully understand their concern, I would be amongst them as well. But perhaps they should just consider that, is it better to have residential units rather than industrial down the road? And the other thing is on the west property, I think they're only going to build on 2/3 of it. There's 66 feet of easement, and the structures don't even go that far out west. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Welcome.
Yeah, Jackie Jamez. I live on Plymouth, which is kind of around the corner. I understand the whole low-cost housing thing and affordable housing. If we're talking about elderly, if we're talking about veterans of foreign war, I am all for that. However, I have lived in Seattle, I've lived in LA, I've lived in St. Louis, I've lived in Kansas City, and I have experienced not so nice neighborhoods of low-cost housing where in my job, I've been in the medical industry, I've adopted families, and I've gone into those communities. And if this is what we're doing, that's fine. And I know that every family has to be qualified to live in this neighborhood, which, like I said, if we're talking about the elderly and veterans, hey, I'm all for it. But I'm sorry, we do not want people that are on drugs, that are doing crimes, that are doing whatever in those communities, because I have experienced that in other low-cost housing areas, and we do not want that in our neighborhood. And if you guys allow this, our property taxes aren't going to go down, are they? No, because we are paying for this, okay? So let's think about that. We are paying for this, and it's not okay. And I know many people in here feel the same way. So our values aren't going to go down, but yet if we want to sell our house, we're not going to get the same value, because if there's 2 low-cost housing projects in our community, we're not going to sell our house for what it's worth. I can guarantee you that. Thank you.
Thank you. Will, checking online. Is there anybody here online to speak to this tonight?
No one online.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Harris Tate. I live on Stone Creek Drive, about 450 feet from this project. I would recommend that you do not change the zoning. I've lived there, be 22 years coming 2 months from now. My neighbors and I decided to move here in part because of the quietness of the neighborhood. We've been through DeVictor Park with Fred DeVictor, and I play pickleball with him, and the latest R.D. Johnson development that was mentioned earlier, and a hotel that was supposed to go in, I think, 10 or 12 years ago. And one thing they decided then was that there aren't a lot of loud parties and dogs barking at 10 o'clock at night in a light industrial area. We've greatly appreciated that. I found it interesting on the proposal. It said, quote, there will be no negative effects on the nearby property. Vacant lots are a greater detriment than what is being proposed. And Ms. Day said that there are nil. I think the people here will tell you that that's not true. There will be changes, negative aspects. Someone just mentioned property values. I wasn't going to talk about that. The traffic and the noise. One of the reasons I heard, oh, by the way, there's not much logic to the reason being there will be no negative effects. Vacant lots are a greater detriment. I don't see the logic there. I really, really don't. I think you will get an argument from people here. One of the reasons, the reason I really didn't care for was this is good because these are the kind of things that I've worked on in Gardner. He said that. That doesn't mean that that's good or bad. The other one was assuming traffic to the east. Walmart, Dillon's, CVS Pharmacy, McDonald's, they're all to the west. And I can tell you that since the Bob Billings, 15th Street, went all the way to the bypass, just that has increased our traffic. And now they're proposing things beyond the bypass on 15th too. Our traffic and our taxes, someone mentioned taxes. My taxes were $1,700 for half a year. Now they're $3,030. They've gone up, and as someone said, we're paying for this. I was also concerned about the maintenance. I've painted my house twice. I aerate my lawn, so does my neighbor. Do affordable housing people do that? 3 minutes, thanks.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here to speak on this tonight? Yes, ma'am. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm Joella Grenard, and we just recently moved here about 2 years ago. We're so happy to be part of your community. Thank you. I will echo what a lot of my neighbors have shared tonight, both for and against the proposal. The only thing that is sticking in my mind left to say is that I think housing is only one part of what people need to be whole people and to be set up for success. There's access to food, mental health help. I'm certainly not a subject matter expert. I know you have access to a lot of people who are, but, and I also understand that that's outside of the scope of the current proposal, but it's not outside of the scope of our concerns as neighbors and newer parents, my husband and I. So we just want to make sure that we're really thoughtful in who we're bringing into the neighborhood and how we're supporting them. And I think housing is certainly a really big step in the right direction for them, but it's not the only step. So if we're not prepared to really support them in the neighborhood, I would respectfully urge you to reconsider.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Yes, sir. Welcome.
Name's John Schmidt. I, without a doubt, live closer than anyone, 50 feet from that curb where they're looking to put that development in. I've lived in that area since 2006. I lived on Legend Circle since 2006. I built a home last year 50 feet from that area. And I have a granddaughter and a handicapped daughter that live with us. That's why we did this. Those kids that live in that area, they ride their bikes around the different streets on Juniper behind us to see the kids that they go to school with. I've seen 2 changes in that whole area, and you could call them character changes. When I lived on Legend Circle, the developer couldn't sell enough of the homes, we were told, so they started renting them to the college students. Well, we had college students throwing parties, 50, 100 students walking across our yard. And this went on for many years. Now, they've moved on because other housing's been built, apartments have been built, and students don't come to that area anymore, and they've gone back to single families. And the character's gone back to where it used to be. And that's what it was when we moved in. And I guarantee you, you do something like this, it changes the character of the neighborhood. I don't want to see that. That's not what we built that home for. And I'd like to see it, I don't want to see it there.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else in the room to speak on this tonight? Hi, welcome.
Hi, my name's Catherine Sheedy, and I live on Stone Creek Drive. Comments were made earlier about the amount of traffic on Stone Creek Drive, and I encourage you to look at that more closely and how this development will affect that. One of the parcels is intended to serve families. That means there are dozens of new cars that will be driving down Stone Creek Drive on their way to Langston Hughes. I encourage you to come, spend an afternoon sitting at the end of my driveway in a lawn chair and tell me if you feel safe. There are times when my kids, it doesn't feel safe to have them in the front yard or the driveway because cars come down that curved road so quickly, I'm afraid cars are going to end up in my front yard. That's not really what I want to talk to you about today. I submitted comments via email, and I hope you will consider those. I take a little bit different perspective than some of my neighbors. I see this as a missed opportunity for business growth in our community. I'm constantly hearing from other residents that they need to go to Kansas City for medical appointments, for recreational activities, for sports teams for their children. This is an area that has a recreational base with dance, gymnastics, martial arts. We need to grow that so people will spend their money in Lawrence, more businesses will grow in Lawrence, and people will want to stay here rather than be in a bedroom community where we work out of town, we spend our money out of town, and eventually we move out of town, because why should we live here when everything else that we need for our families is out of town? So I encourage you to look long-term. It's consistent with the 2040 plan to encourage new business growth along main corridors in Lawrence, and this fits that. There wasn't much development in this area 25 years ago. I think it's premature to say that this area will not be developed. It's still growing, and we shouldn't trade the current zoning for more residential zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Is there anyone else in the room tonight on this topic? Will, do you see anybody online?
No one online.
All right. All right. The applicant has 5 minutes if you'd like to provide any additional feedback, response, the things you've heard tonight.
Sure, I just want to address some specific things. The first is that the Housing Authority has a maintenance staff of 11 people, and we do take care of our properties, and we would take care of these properties. We also, as we said, one of the projects would be to serve seniors. The Housing Authority's demographics is 1/3 of the people we serve are seniors, 1/3 of the people we serve are disabled, and 1/3 of the people we serve are families. We do serve veterans. We have specific programs for veterans. They certainly would be eligible for this housing. And I understand the neighbors' concerns about the traffic, but not allowing housing to be built is not the solution to a traffic issue. There are other solutions that can be taken to address the traffic, and stopping development is not one of them. There aren't a lot of parcels of land to purchase in the city of Lawrence. And so if we're going to build affordable housing, it has to be in some neighborhood. At this point, more of the vacant land is on the west side, and it's only appropriate that we have housing for all levels of affordability on the west side and any place in town. The Housing Authority's been here more than 50 years. We take care of our properties. We're doing a major facelift on one of our oldest properties on Haskell. It's more than 50 years old, and we are completely redoing it because we do intend to be a good neighbor, and we always have been. It's not accurate to say that taxpayer dollars will be used to fund this development. The Housing Authority would intend to get tax credits, which is a program through the federal government to support this, plus some reserves that we hold. So we are not seeking any sort of tax to pay for this development. So I don't know if you have questions, but I just wanted to address
You very well might, but we'll come to you
Great.
later. Shannon, thank you so much. All right, with that, public comment is closed. We'll bring it back to the commission for discussion. Anyone like to start? Anyone have questions or thoughts they want to share? Sure. Yes, Jane.
I have some questions for Shannon, if I may. Shannon, are all the properties that the Housing Authority owns always remain rental properties? Do you ever develop something for purchase for people?
We do not.
Never do?
We have not, no.
In your decision to look at fourplexes and eightplexes, did you consider looking at duplexes?
We did. There is a issue with it's very difficult to make a pro forma work when you build at market rate, which we all have to build at market rate, and then you rent to individuals who are below the median area income. And so the more units you have, of course, the better you can make that pro forma work. There would be a point where it wouldn't be economically feasible because you wouldn't have enough units to make it so.
What would you need to use duplexes on these grounds? What additional resources would you need?
We haven't really run the pro forma because, as I say, at this point, we're just trying to purchase the land. And then we will develop. We do not internally have the expertise to do a tax credit project, so we are going to have to contract with a consultant to help us through that process. So I can't really answer your question today.
Have you been through any tax credit process yet?
No.
Okay. If you are not going to be building this for years, did you say?
Yes, several years. Tax credits are one of those situations where it takes, we will have to develop the project, and then a lot of times it takes several years to get awarded the tax credit.
So in that case, would you be willing to have any zoning conditioned on a site plan, which would not normally come back to the Planning Commission, but conditioned on the site plan coming to the Planning Commission?
I guess maybe explain what that would entail.
I'd like to check in with Jeff if we could on that question.
Well, maybe we'll need to come back to you and I'll ask that question again. But in our Plan 2040, there is a suggestion that if we do increased zoning and we're doing changes of zoning, is highly dependent on the design of that project. And we won't know anything about what the project is actually going to be, and neither will your neighbors until you get to the site plan approval stage. I know that your intentions are to be a good neighbor, and I have no reason to believe you wouldn't be. But the proof will be in the pudding of the site plan, and I'd like to know if that could be a condition on a rezoning.
You know, I'd have to think about that a little bit harder there, because typically you can't make a condition on a zoning. The city commission is the body that can make a condition on the zoning, and so it'd be a recommendation from the planning commission to that effect.
Sure.
So there are instances where that has occurred, where they have done it under certain instances, but you can't make that, you can make that recommendation, but it could not be a condition you would imply on it tonight.
I thank you. I understand that, but if we could make a recommendation that that be the condition that the city commission adopt, would you have any objection to that?
Well, I guess I don't completely understand what you're asking me to agree to, so.
It would be saying that your zoning would not really be final until your design for your project would be final, which would be when you would be getting ready to start building.
I mean, I think at that point, we would have an issue with, I mean, the way our option on this property works right now is, right, I have to make a decision by the end of the summer, whether we're going to purchase it or not. And I wouldn't want to purchase it, I mean, it wouldn't be being a good steward of the housing authority's funds if I purchased a property that I then really couldn't use. So that is my only concern about that.
I understand your concern. Thank you.
Sure.
Just for the commission's knowledge on that one, under conditional zoning, there are some very specific things at which you can and cannot condition to it, and some of those do include conditions must meet or exceed, sorry, my eyes have failed me, meet and or exceed established minimum design standards, and can restrict, prohibit uses permitted by right or allowed by special use permit in the base district, enhance written notice, kind of paraphrase, limit or restrict the density permitted by right in the base district, sorry, Becky, and restrict the intensity of a development to include but not limited to items in Article 6, which are density and dimensional standards, or Article 5 use regulations. So the commission has that knowledge of the code there.
I think in this case, the zoning for each of the two parcels, one RM12, one RM15, we'd have to make our decision on granting or denying that recommendation, knowing that it just carries with the land, and it's not specific to a particular project, because that could change. And all well-intended, something could happen between now and then that would allow that parcel to be built to its maximum density. Yes, Sharon?
I have a question for Sandy. So the parcel is currently zoned IBP. Can you list some of the types of uses that could currently be on that site if it remained IBP?
Things that are out there now, Castle Plumbing. There is Microtech. There are numerous medical offices, the gymnastics and the dance that you've heard. There's a enormous list. Now, if you want to look at what some of those research kind of uses, that's how the zoning was designed or intended. That is not how it has developed historically.
And it's been vacant for how long? I forget.
Since it's been annexed, and I was not able to define exactly when that came in, but I think that was late 80s, early 90s, part of that time period. So it's been vacant since then.
Okay, and can you, for the benefit of everybody's, sort of outline, so there's this process tonight, but then there's the site plan whenever that comes. Can you discuss how that process would move forward?
The action you're being asked to take tonight is the zoning. What is the list of uses that can be permitted on this property, whether it's multifamily, whether it stays industrial, or something in there. The site plan process is administrative. An applicant would submit that site plan to staff, and we would review it for compliance with the Land Development Code. That deals with setback, landscaping, parking. City does not, at this time today, have residential design guidelines. The only way to get at what was being proposed by Commissioner Eldridge would be through a planned development. So that would be a base zoning district with a planned development. That requires the applicant to put forth a substantial amount of engineering and work and design that would go through the public hearing process. Site plan, if you meet the conditions of the base zoning district, if you can meet your setback, if you can meet your density, if you can meet your parking, if you can meet your street tree requirements, if you can meet your open space requirements, 50 square feet per dwelling unit, all of those components, then we could have that site plan approved. The public has the opportunity to appeal a site plan. That appeal then would be received to our office. Then it would be scheduled to a city commission for them to take up a site plan through a public hearing process. And they would be evaluating that site plan on those same kind of criteria that staff had to review the site plan for. The property is platted already, so they do not, at this time that I see, would have to go through any kind of, regardless of who develops the property, there's not a subdivision component to that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I have a question just to follow up. And that would also be for any industrial use, right?
Yes.
So any industrial use that wanted to come in that would already be allowed under the current zoning, they would just do a site plan.
They
and
would
as long
follow
as
that
they
same-
met all of the requirements, then the same process would be followed.
That is correct.
Thank you.
I have
Do you have something else, Jean?
Yes. What is the maximum zoning that could be, or the maximum, unit designation that could be allowed in the M12, the RM12 parcel?
The RM12 district has a maximum density of 12 dwelling units per acre. And I don't have a calculator. Jeff's probably over there doing the math as we're talking. That gives you a gross number. But in that number, you also have to deal with setback and parking and landscaping and lighting and all of those other components. So it's not always easy to achieve the specific development density, and that development density can look very different across different properties. How they're configured, this particular property has a significant easement on one side of it. It also has a standard utility easement on another side of it. So that will push those structures more to the center of the property, at least the one on Legends Drive.
So, knowing that it's not going to be a necessarily accurate figure, each parcel has a known acreage right now.
Right.
So, for instance, the one on Legends Drive is a little over 3 acres. So that could have a maximum number of units of 36 or less, depending on
Probably.
the site plan.
Mhm.
And in the RM15,
Excuse me.
yeah,
Sorry. The applicant has done some of the math, so it was 48.
48?
Yeah.
On the Legends Drive?
And I'll let the applicant address that particular question for you. It's difficult to answer your question and have different things coming at me.
Okay. The RM12 is how many units per acre? That's 12 units?
12 units per acre.
And the RM15 is 15?
15 units per acre. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, comments, thoughts?
Those numbers, just the stuff that we were just talking about, this property or the site plan, it would be under the new, depending on when things came through, right? It could be the current land development code, or the new land development code. So some of the numbers and stuff we're talking about, it would just kind of depend on what was in play at the time and any changes.
That is correct. An applicant would be subject to whatever the standards are at the time they make the application. If they submit tomorrow, they're under our current land development code. If they submit in September, October, January of some future year, it will be whatever that code is.
So it's just kind of important to remember as we think about.
Yeah, that's true.
Other thoughts or questions? I'll share a couple of comments. I guess I have a question, Jeff. If a traffic study is done, there have been multiple comments made about concerns about traffic tonight. And a traffic study is a part of the condition I read on this this particular thing that's in front of us. If that traffic study comes back and says there's a problem or limitation of some kind, what happens then?
It's a discussion that goes with MSO and a conversation about what can be done to either mitigate or road improvements that need to occur as part of the project. And so it's a conversation that would occur between the developer and municipal services and operations once we have the results of the study.
Right. So is there any condition where they would come back and say, yep, it's a problem and we're not going to do anything about it?
The developer or municipal services and operations?
I'm talking about city's oversight of a project like this and its impact to neighbors.
If this traffic study flags something, we would definitely be having a conversation with the engineers to understand what warrants that would receive and what would not be necessary to get to a point where the engineers had comfort in it that it met the criteria that they operate under.
Okay, thank you. I also want to ask, there were several comments made concerning potential impacts to property value. As commissioners, how are we to think about property value impacts and decisions?
It's a great question. It's one of those that's really tough to answer in a lot of ways, because when you look at property valuations, and I'm by no means an appraiser, so keep that in mind, is that it looks at comparables and different things as part of the selling and reselling value of those things there. So that's those market fluctuations will occur naturally, even regardless of a project being proposed or not proposed. So depending upon the wider market, those fluctuations will occur. You can look at those kind of as maybe as a character of a neighborhood situation, but quite honestly, there's not a lot of conversation in the code about guidance on that. And so it is a little bit of a conversation that the commission can have in that regard.
All right, thank you. Thank you. So just generally speaking, as I look at this project, if I've driven out on the site and understand the concerns about how density might impact roads, I think we've got, to my opinion, we've got the method in place for us to determine that, mitigate those risks. Impact to school populations, not just clearly not in our purview. I think about the fact that this property's been vacant for a very, very long time. And now comes an applicant that is bringing a capability to our community that is clearly needed. It's a developer, tenant, and a landlord in good standing in our community for decades. So I have very little concern about that. I hear from neighbors both positive, both for this and against this. And one, though, I in particular, I heard the people that own the property and own Montessori that's right next to it, and how they're advocating for this, not as a concern, but actually as something that is considered a positive. I look at the transition from just inside this particular space from single family on one side of Maryland onto Stone Creek to duplexes that run right up along this property line where this new development is being discussed, to the idea of fourplexes. No guarantee of that, of course, but fourplexes and then into 8 seems thoughtful in an approach to manage density as it moves away from the neighborhood that's been there for a while. Understanding that that is different than what's maybe across the fence from them right now, but knowing what it might be in industrial. I think that this might be considered. I guess I wonder what the conversation might be like, what we might be hearing from the same neighbors if we're talking about 3 stories of industrial that's right up against this neighborhood. Right. So please, no comment, please. So I wonder about that. I think about that as I think about that progression. I'm generally in favor of approving this rezoning. I'm generally in favor of approving this rezoning, recognizing it as step one in a lot of steps between now and the date that something is actually going to be built there, recognizing that there's going to be public process in a number of ways before dirt would be turned. So generally speaking, I believe in that. And the idea, the question about where should this go if not here, I mean, golly, how many times have we had things come before us that I'm all in favor of it, but just not right here, not right here. And I totally get that. I totally get it. But for me, this makes sense. I think about all of the review criteria without question. I look down all of the review criteria with the possible exception of impact to character of the neighborhood, which keys off of property value, which there's just nothing out there that I can point to that says, yes, that will in fact happen. I lean towards support.
Please go ahead.
I would like to comment on how can I start? Well, let's begin with, I support what the applicant is trying to do, and I think it's extremely nice. But my primary concern is that rezoning this area and not having a solid plan of what is going to be built is opening the ground for something else that might happen in the future. Like the applicant mentioned, it will take maybe years and a lot of hoops that are going to have to be jumped before something can be built, and anything can happen between now and then. Yes, I can promise you heaven and earth, but nothing is on paper.
So, wait just a second. Please, no more speaking out loud, please. I'm asking you nicely. I'm asking you nicely. Thank you.
On another note, yes, we are in need of affordable housing, but in my personal opinion, with all due respect to everyone, I believe that we're in a crisis for single-family home, and especially affordable housing for single-family. I don't think we are in a crisis for more apartments in town, and I speak that for experience. I don't believe that the city of Lawrence needs more apartments. We have plenty of those. They're out there. And yes, many of those apartments can meet your 30% annual income. Yes, because I helped about 7 people this month. Immediate move-in, and I was able to help them to find those apartments. They're out there. We just have to look. And I believe that single-family houses is what the city of Lawrence needs right now. We're in crisis. There's only 59 houses out there for sale, single-family homes, right now as we speak, and about 100,000 people living in here. So with a project like this, I understand that the applicant has the best intentions. I do believe that. But what we're trying, once the rezoning is done, it goes with the land. If something happened with the applicant along the way, someone else can come in and build something else, something that we might regret in the future. And we're having all the pieces together. I don't feel comfortable that something like this will not change the character of the neighborhood.
And so can I ask a question about that? I want to understand what you're saying. When I think about this, you're talking about, is this single family versus apartments?
Yes, affordable housing, and again, that was, in my personal opinion, is not well defined within the code. And again, I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone, but I think that needs to be clarified in a way that if we're going to use that word, affordable housing, we have to define it, whether it's affordable rental or affordable single-family homes, for families to move in and progress. Affordable rental doesn't, I mean, it's out there already. We're not in a crisis for affordable rental. We're not. There's plenty of apartments. You drive around the city, you'll see them out there, and more being built. So, and again, with a project like this, with a lot of steps still that needs to be taken, I think the rezoning, it might have to be the last one. We need to know what is going in there before we take that step. And again, that is my personal opinion, just because I don't know if in the future, if something changes, the character of the neighborhood will change. And that is my concern on that.
So just clicking in a little bit more, could I ask Shannon to speak just a little bit, if you would? The question about Big A affordable, if you could come up for just a minute, and what that inventory looks like. There's the idea floated that there's not a shortage of affordable rental places. Just want to get a sense from you, being in that world every day, if you...
Yeah, and unfortunately, we need affordable in every category. We need affordable home ownership, but we also need affordable apartment complexes. And if you look at the study, the housing study, it showed that we needed 5,000 new units, right? And that was done in 18. And we issue vouchers that our clients go and try to find places to rent. And we have seen that process take longer and longer for our particularly participants to find a place, because we live in a college town, and so you have student housing, which is very different than affordable rental. And so I guess I would say I disagree that affordable rental is not something we need in this community. We have a list of over 400 people waiting on our waiting list, and particularly like seniors, because they don't necessarily want to live in mixed communities, right? So most of the communities we build just have only seniors in them. We can put a designation, just like the property that's going to go down at the end of Mass, right? Is it's an affordable rental, and it's going to be for seniors. So I don't think it's accurate to say that we don't need affordable rental.
Talking maybe about the difference between Big A, Little A affordable, which is we need housing in every category, everywhere, regardless of price point, and Big A affordable, which is what you're proposing to use this property for, which is subsidized in a way that helps people not in that general market. Is that
correct?
Accurate?
Yes. I mean, we primarily serve people who are at, right, the very, very low income, so 30% of AMI, generally up to 60, 70% of AMI. I mean, we even a developer who does a tax credit, sometimes they go up to 80. We just don't serve up to 80. And as I say, I mean, primarily we have people on fixed incomes, either seniors and disabled. And so it is not as if they're not worthy of a place to live. It's that they have a fixed income, and we only require them to pay 30% of their income for their housing, and we use the assistance to make up the difference, basically.
Thank you.
I have a question for Shannon before she
Sure.
steps down. I remember past discussions of the Planning Commission when we were dealing with other issues like what was called the double density. Can you, and at that time, it was quite evident that the majority of the Big A affordable housing was on the east side of Lawrence, east of Iowa. Can you update us on what that percentage is of, like, say, east of Iowa versus west of Iowa for the kinds of properties you're talking about?
Yeah, so the Housing Authority, we only own 2 properties that are across Iowa, Clinton Place, which has 58 units, and Peterson Acres, which has about 32 units. Everything else that the Housing Authority owns is on the east side. Tenants to homeowners has a similar distribution, that primarily all of the units they've built and/or rent are on the east side. And one of the things that really has come out of the data and the studies is that you don't want to concentrate, right, the need for affordable housing in one location. That kind of takes you back to some of those issues of redlining and those different kind of things where people were creating ghettos. And I don't think that is not the current thought process. And I sort of wonder when people are talking about the character of the neighborhood, what exactly that means, because these are people who will be living in a home. I mean, we're not seeking to build 350 units of apartments that we're going to have students, right? That's not what we're looking to do here. So I'm not actually certain about what we say when we say character. And I mean, these will be people's homes, and they'll live there just like all of us live in our homes. And the other point I think I would like to make too is we don't have a ton of developers out there looking to build affordable first-time home buyer. I served 8 years on the Affordable Housing Advisory Board, and quite frankly, we had no private developer come and ask us, right, for any funding except one project that is out on O'Connell Road. The only funds that were being sought for affordable purchase home buyer were Habitat and tenants to homeowners. So while I completely agree, I think we need all categories of affordable housing. The fact of the matter is that we're just not having anyone seek to fill that need. And so, yeah, predominantly it's all on the east side. And I think, the thought process is that it's better for our entire community if it's spread over our entire community.
I had a question. Oh, sorry.
Please.
I was just going to ask about the renting. Do you know, what is like do you have a idea of the general term? You're flipping them a lot, or it sounds to me like there are people who come and rent these for many years or for a duration of their time. And I was just curious as to that versus like a lot of turnover with new people all the time.
Yeah, we do not, particularly in our senior properties like Babcock and Clinton Place and Peterson Acres, people generally only leave if they have to go to like a nursing home or some other, or if they pass. Actually, it's weird to say, but we do not have turnover really in our senior facilities. And in our housing, we have turnover, but it's not like a student sort of turnover. I wouldn't guess that it's more than, 5 to 7% a year, something like that.
I have a follow-up. One of your earlier comments with respect to so many of your properties now are east of Iowa. What's the historical reason for that? Why haven't you been able to do more development west of Iowa?
So most of our properties were developed when HUD had funding to build public housing. So primarily the housing that we own is public housing. We have also purchased Clinton Place, which was constructed with a HUD loan, and we were able to buy that out of a foreclosure. So it's a different program from HUD. And up until about a year ago, the Housing Authority did not have the ability to own or sell property in its own name, and we had our authorizing resolution changed about a year ago. The City Commission authorized that so we could get into the process of developing and purchasing more affordable housing in the community.
Thank you. Question.
Yes.
Shannon, you mentioned you have a waiting list of 400 people.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they currently living? What is their
Well, I mean,
status?
I think, like if that same study, the one that the city commissioned in 18, the reports we get, almost 50% of our town is rental. And of that, a huge percent, like I think another 50% of that is what they call housing burdened, meaning they pay more, up to 50% or more of their income for their housing, which creates a real problem, right, for families if you have to pay that much for your housing.
Thank you. David?
I have a question for staff. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Appreciate
Shannon?
it. Going back to the subject of traffic, are there statistics about the general traffic load of multifamily residential versus some of the other permitted uses today? I mean, so for example, you have 70 units, but the competing use, doctor's offices, gymnastics schools, daycare centers, what the overall, entrance and egress of cars is for those two types of land uses. Do we have any statistics about that?
Those statistics do exist, and we would typically refer to the blue book or the green book that the traffic engineers use. So and I'm just going to start picking numbers out of the air here. If a household, if a residence generates 7 vehicle trips in a day, leaving my house, I'm going to work, I'm taking kids to school, taking kids to practice, coming home, whatever those vehicle trips are, you can look at that and do a comparative analysis to a bank, which we have a number of banks in the IBP district. You can compare that to a doctor's office, which has an extremely high turnover in terms of the traffic that's coming and going throughout the day of those things. Those peak travels happen at different times, on different days, depending on what the use is. We get into that analysis when we have a specific project in front of us. We don't tend to look at it at this level.
That's fair.
So.
Okay. I call attention to it, obviously, because traffic is something that is a concern of the neighbors. And a point that I wish I could make with some concrete numbers, at least about the general traffic loads, the vehicle trips, would be it's vacant. Vacant land doesn't generate any traffic. But something, even the suggestions that some other use go there, will generate more traffic. I live in a neighborhood that has had traffic issues for a century. And it's an evolving ecosystem. There are always going to be new challenges, and somebody else not under the purview of this body is going to have to deal with making streets safer when they're being used unintentionally as collector streets or arterials instead of just local streets. I don't have any other questions at the moment. I have some comments, but I'm happy to let other commissioners pose questions.
Any other questions? Charlie?
Oh, I don't have a question. I'd make a comment. What we are really talking about is change. We can call it any number of things, change. And my understanding that in Chinese, it takes 2 characters to make the word change. One is opportunity. With change comes an opportunity. But the other word is danger. And I think balancing those out, and what I hear from other commissioners, the danger is we don't have something concrete, whether it's traffic and whether it is what will really be developed there, what will it look like, not just this project, but any project. And I think the comments that generally I hear are, here is an opportunity to serve an underserved population in Lawrence. Here is an opportunity to keep a wonderful green space that has been used by some of the people for 25 years. It has been empty. And now we are throwing in this, something is going to change, and we can't define what that is right now. These are for me, this is a hard decision because on the one hand, we have our Plan 2040 that talks about the importance of open space, green space, and we also talk about affordable housing. Those are issues that I struggle with. There is danger in any change, and this will be a change if we approve this.
Thank you, Charlie. Other comments or questions? Yes, sir.
Since everybody else has spoken but me, I figure I had to speak up here. I agree with what Charlie just said. I mean, we all get very concerned about change, and it's scary, and there's a lot of unknown. But also, and I know, and Gary and I have talked about this. Sorry, Commissioner Rexroad and I have talked about this on previous matters. That while a lot of people might say, "Oh, it's green space," and we use it, it's somebody's property. I mean, if you're out there walking a dog or playing a game, you're technically trespassing. Unless you have the permission of that owner. It's not a city-owned park. It's somebody's property. And I think that gets lost in the translation, and it doesn't make, I mean, I'm conflicted as to how I feel about this still at this point, but it's more appropriate to call it green space because it's not developed, but it's not, or sorry, open space, but it's not green space. It's not a public park. It's still private property.
Thank you. Other comments? Yes, sir.
I'm going to be brief since I think other commissioners have already said most of the things on my mind. I'm generally in favor of this, and I'm very sensitive to the concerns of the neighbors with respect to change in the character of the neighborhood. I think we can beat around the bush, but I think it's inevitable that time will always bring some change in character, whether it's this or something else. And part of the change in character is, you know, you meet new families, you meet new seniors, you meet new neighbors who happen to be disabled, you meet people who are different from yourself. And I think that part of 2040 is also promoting healthy communities, and part of healthy communities are diverse communities. And as far as this use, I think, as Commissioner Rexroad said previously, it is a viable transitional use of multifamily between the industrial and business park zoning and the single family. I've driven it, I've walked the property, observed the different character of the housing that's there right now. The 8 plexes face Legends with the, I think that's right. Research Park Drive with the adjoining businesses as opposed to private residences. The staff review of the site plan, it would be the step for a development like this to be judged, evaluated, any effects mitigated. The public would have an opportunity to comment on and contest that. I see this as broadly a positive thing, not just for the city, but also for the neighborhood.
Thank you. I just had one comment as I listened to the concerns, and I share that. I mean, we have to do this without the belief that this one applicant is going to build what they've shown tonight, right? It runs with the land. Jane, though, raised an interesting question, an interesting point, and I find myself thinking that if we do recommend approval to the City Commission, that we also send along a recommendation that they condition rezoning on the work being done with this applicant. And if it doesn't go through to their satisfaction, that they have an opportunity to back up. Again, all we can do is recommend that they consider that, but I'd recommend that we voice that to them.
I think I'm just curious. I mean, I like that idea, and the zoning is always nerve-wracking because it runs with the land. But what I heard the applicant say is that would be a serious problem for them to be able to go forward with the project. And part of what I'm leaning generally in favor of it, and part of what I am really valuing is the affordable housing that's set out in the plan, and a lot of the things David and everyone has said. So makes me nervous, right? What are we doing to the project or to the applicant if we condition it that way?
Very good question, and maybe we can ask Shannon just a question directly. If you come up, please. Because I thought I was navigating past that, but maybe I didn't.
Okay.
What I had just said was that if this commission recommends approval of these two requests for zoning, and that we sent along with that our recommendation to the city commission that should they approve zoning, that they also have some condition on working with you on site plan to meet everyone's satisfaction. That's very, very vague. I don't see that as something that stops them or you. But I don't know, how does that strike you? Does that strike you as a limitation or a concern?
Well, I mean, it's hard to know exactly what that would mean, right?
Kind of depends on what that condition was.
Yeah. I mean, we don't.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
That, as I say it out loud, as I listen to you, that's fair enough.
Well, just because she doesn't purchase the it's not like she owns the housing authority owns the property, so it switches. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a fair point, Chelsea. Thank you.
I'm going to have to agree with Commissioner Hayden on that one. I'm not going to be comfortable with some vague condition.
All right.
I'm going to say that I am comfortable with it. I think that the neighbors are in the position that they don't know what they're getting.
Well,
and I think that is even more true because everybody wants to support affordable housing. And so I think that we would overcome our concerns about change because it's affordable housing. But I think that's really unfair to the neighbors. And I think that Ms. Zoury has done a fabulous job on all the properties that she manages for us, for the city of Lawrence. And I don't have any doubt that she will continue to do that and want to be a good neighbor and work with neighbors on what goes there. But I think that just as the neighbors are going to have to deal with a lot of unknowns in the change, I think that it's okay for Ms. Zoury to undertake some unknowns too. Until you spend that money to do the engineering, you aren't even going to know if it's going to work for you for what you want to do, not how it's going to work with the neighbor. And so I think it's a very good condition, particularly since all we can do is recommend. And if the city disagrees, they don't have to adopt it.
So just as a way to task forward on this, I'll ask Jeff a question. We've got two items that we're going to vote on for zoning. Once those are satisfied, would it be appropriate in that condition if a commissioner wanted to make a third motion to make a specific recommendation? Would that be the way that we should approach that?
No, because what would happen is the motion that was first would be the one that was forwarded. You can't make two motions on the same item.
All right, so it'd have to be stipulated inside the motion that we made.
Correct.
All right. All right. I'm sorry, no, sir. I apologize. Nope. I'm sorry, public comments closed.
I had a question on a different.
I'm sorry?
I had a question on something a little bit different. I've heard a couple different times that public process and that the public would have an opportunity to weigh in again. But then I've also kind of heard that actually everything from here on is administrative and it's only through appeal that the public would have an opportunity to weigh in. So I just wanted one clarification on that point. And two, where is that written? Is that in the land development code or is that other regulations regarding appeals? And I only ask because the current land development code is in flux. And so I'm just curious as to if it's in there and can be worked on in there or if it's somewhere else.
I think this goes on to the, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
So the site planning process is administrative, and there is an appeal route to the city commission, and it has criteria of what has to be triggered to go through that part. But throughout the site planning process, notice is sent out to parties. And so 400 feet notice would be sent out, and if somebody was interested in it, and very frequently this does happen, is people will come in and talk with staff about what's being proposed, what's going on, here's our concerns on those items. And it's, on occasions, if we have a lot of those, we will get a meeting with neighbors and the applicant and planning staff together to have that conversation, those concerns. And so a lot of good projects go through that process, just in a normal, everyday item. But if the administrative determination by staff is rendered and someone doesn't like it, it can be appealed to the city commission, who would hear the case and use the same criteria that staff have to use to find if that is the motion forward on that one.
And that process is set out in the current land development code?
Correct. It's under section 201305 in the code currently.
Look at you. 2013-05. I got it. Like you knew I was going to ask or something.
Rolls right off the tongue.
Jeff, as a point of clarification, just to make sure I understand this. So it's neighbors within 400 feet receive notice.
Correct.
Those aren't the only parties that could provide input within this process. Is that accurate?
That's correct. So if anybody would be interested in that one, the yellow signs would go up and anybody could reach out on that one. You can also just, the signs will have the details on how to reach us. But yeah, anybody can participate in that process. And we also send those notices to the registered neighborhood associations in the area.
Got it.
Any other comment, questions on this item? Entertain a motion?
Well, I'll just make a comment briefly that this is a rezoning request going with the land. So whether or not this project happens, one thing I did notice in the comments, the written letters to the commission, is that there, traffic aside, which we've talked about, a lot of the concern was not so much for apartments, but as the affordable apartments. So I'm definitely inclined to support this project. We don't know what's going to happen, but I didn't hear a lot of concerns about just apartments in general. I think the traffic can be handled with the process going forward. And part of my reasoning for supporting it is the balance of affordable housing on the east and west side of Iowa, as called for in the comprehensive plan. And it also meets all the criteria, decision criteria.
Thank you, Sharon. Mr. Munch?
I feel that I'm also inclined to support this application, in part for many of the reasons that have been stated here tonight, but focusing primarily on whether or not this meets the criteria that we're supposed to apply when considering zoning changes. I think the staff's conclusions on each of those points are fair. I agree with that. I guess as a general comment, as is often the case in these kinds of big applications, we hear from the public about the prospective use and what might happen in the future, which is excellent, but I would also flag for city commission and city departments that might be viewing this, that we also hear about concerns about the present state of the neighborhood. And we have heard some concerns tonight about traffic as it exists today without any other future development. We've heard interest in potential additional recreation development. And I hope that the decision makers on those points are paying attention and would seek to engage with this part of our community to see if they can align interests as to what's currently happening in this area. So everybody's better prepared for any future development as well.
Thank you, sir.
Just make one comment.
Yes.
So I think there are neighborhoods in Lawrence where it's indistinguishable. You look at a house and you can't tell that it's an affordable house versus just a regular house. And I think that it would be in the neighbor's best interest and in the developer's best interest to build something that nobody can tell the difference, right? It's just housing. It's not affordable, or it's just housing. So I just want to say that. So anyway, that's it.
Does anyone care to make a motion? Sharon, please.
This is for the first of two motions.
Yes, please.
Let's see, let me find the language here. I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of 3.16 acres from IBP district to RM12 district based on the findings presented in the staff report and forwarding it to the City Commission with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. David? Discussion. Jane.
I'm not going to be able to support that motion, and I'm not going to be able to support all the staff findings, which is why I can't support the motion. And particularly, I'd like to refer to, the staff directed us to pages 28 and 29 of Plan 2040, and particularly the integrating higher density residential development, which is dependent on compatible design. And that's the piece that we don't know. But our comprehensive plan says design should be a part of that. I think that's important. I think that the character of the neighborhood will change, and I think the staff has indicated that it's a significant change. But in the staff opinion, it's okay, because it is transitional. The other portions of the staff findings that I do not find acceptable is that the staff said that the property is no longer suitable for what it was designed for, although acknowledging that the neighborhood character is dominated by low-density residential. This is medium-density residential, and it is directly across from low-density residential, as opposed to the other piece, which is not. I think this is a separate piece that needs to be treated separately. And I therefore will not be supporting it. But thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Other discussion? Motion made to approve. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, same sign. All right, carries 8-2. There's a second motion, a second vote needed on the other item. Do you want to make that one as well?
I move that we recommend approval of 2.83 acres from IBP district to RM15 district based on the findings presented in the staff report and forwarding it to the City Commission with a recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, sure. DeVer. Any discussion? Those in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Carries 8-2. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate your time tonight. We are at 8:15. Are we okay to keep going on our next item? We want to break?
I'm going to pop out real quick, but I'll be back in a flash.
We're going to take 5 minutes. Let's be back. In fact, let's take 8. Let's be back at 8:25.
There now.
So whenever, I was gonna say, you're the first.
All right, and we're back in. Will, are y'all ready? All right, thank you so much. We're back in. Item number 2, last item tonight, is a text amendment. And I see Becky there.
Oh, Becky.
The lone sentinel.
Becky, are you here for Mary Miller?
I am going to try and fill Mary's gigantic shoes.
Gigantic
tonight.
shoes.
Yes,
All right,
Mary,
Becky,
happy
thank you.
with this. Okay, so the last item on the agenda tonight is a text amendment application to the county zoning regulations. This was a text amendment application that was submitted by a citizen, and it was initiated by the Board of County Commissioners on April 3rd of this year. This text amendment would correct an omission that was created with the adoption of our new county zoning regulations in 2020. And under our previous zoning code, it contained a use category called offices and research facilities. And under that code, the office use was permitted either by right in some zoning districts or permitted with approval of a conditional use permit. And in those cases, when a conditional use permit was required, it also required that the office use be contained within an existing building for an adaptive reuse of that building. So when the new zoning regulations were adopted in 2020, they separated those two uses. They separated the office use and the research facility into two separate uses. And then it also permitted the office use by right in some zoning districts. So it permitted it by right in the general business district and in the Big Springs Community District. And it also then permitted it in the Village District with approval of a conditional use permit. But what it omitted, what it unintentionally did not carry forward, was that with this new code, you couldn't do an adaptive reuse with a conditional use permit in other zoning districts. So what this proposed text amendment would do would be to add that back in for the office use. So that by adding the use as a conditional use permit in the agricultural district and the transitional agricultural district, again, with approval of a conditional use permit, and also that it be an adaptive reuse of an existing building on site. This would be consistent with what had been approved in our previous code had contained. And so as I mentioned, that ability was unintentionally not carried forward. It was an error on that we were proposed to correct with this text amendment. So you can find the draft language of those code changes on page 5 of your staff report. Again, that basically includes adding the use into the agricultural and transitional agricultural zoning districts with approval of a conditional use permit, and with it being an adaptive reuse of an existing building on site. So with that, staff recommends approval of the text amendment, and that Planning Commission forward that recommendation of approval to the Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you. There's no applicant. Is there no one left in the room to speak on this? Will you see anybody online who might be here to speak on this subject?
Doesn't appear to be anyone online.
All right, thank you. With that, back to the commission. Any comment, questions at this item?
I have two
Yes, Jane?
questions.
Yes.
In the proposed language on new section 12-30650 office, the second line of A, I think we might want to insert the word that between than and which.
For clarification, to read an office that is permitted, is that the area?
No, on the second line where it's talking about existing building for a purpose other than that, I think we want to insert the word that.
Okay.
Other than
That which
was.
Other than that, which it was, yeah.
Okay.
And then in B, on the first line, I'd like to insert "and," which would be office used must have been in an other use.
Okay.
That doesn't change the meaning, it's just clarity, right?
No, just, it's
Any
easier for me
objections to that? Any objections? Great adds. Any other comment, questions on this?
I'm glad that C is there in the language, because I question the durability and stability of that facility, knowing that tornado hit it dead on and destroyed the gym that's right next to it.
So they've done a good job in their language.
In including that it's got to be inspected, yes.
All right, any other comments? Yes.
Just to clarify, and Becky, I think you said it, it's here in black and white. This was a purely unintentional and incidental omission that we're just trying to restore.
Correct.
Okay, great.
And so we can look forward to many more agenda items like this after the land development code is.
Sneak preview. Yes.
I'm excited.
I know. Whenever you do a code like this code or the land development code coming up, you do what's called basically as a shakedown text amendment. After you go through it for about 12 to 18 months of living with it, you collect all the things you didn't catch the first time through, or you missed a then or that in there. And so, yes, you will probably enjoy these a few more times in both codes, I suspect.
Little cleanup goes a long way. That's great.
Spring cleaning.
Yep.
Anything else on this item?
Move approval.
Move for approval, second. Charlie seconds.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Does the motion include the changes that Commissioner Eldridge outlined?
Yes.
Approval with the changes that Commissioner Eldridge gave, the that and the and. Second by Charlie, yes?
Yes.
Second, all right. Discussion? Favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Any other items for consideration before this commission tonight?
One last piece of information. Today happens to be my 57th wedding anniversary.
How about that?
Anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
And what the heck are you doing here?
I think
The state of the marriage, the state of
Is this also Commissioner Kelso's birthday?
No, that was yesterday.
Yesterday, we just missed
And
it.
it was a big one and a zero.
All right. I'd sure entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved. Second. Discussion. Favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? We're out. Thank you all so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Good work tonight. As always.
Indeed.
And
for your observation.
Easy, Chad.